Okay, the two old guys back at it again. Music Milestones, YYZ, Ivor and Scott. Hi, Ivor. How are you?
Hey, not too bad. Not too bad.
World Cup edition number 2, I guess, right? When does the
Yeah.
whole World Cup thing wrap up?
Oh, it's at least another 3 weeks.
Right.
Because they added a lot of teams to this tournament. It's the biggest one ever. So lots and lots going on. But I gotta say that I'm really getting into it. And you see all of the social media of people, what's going on around the world, and these amazing fans that represent their countries and stuff. And Scotland, in particular, stands out. But we'll get into that in a little bit because we got some soccer
Yeah,
stuff upcoming on the program.
for sure. We wanted to get into right off the bat here. We've been talking about this new CFNY book now that the documentary is done, and you can still get the DVD, by the way, which has the extended version, the extended mix through CFNYDoc.com. Is there still stock available for
Yes.
the DVD and the
Yeah.
Blu-ray?
Although it is getting down, we'll order some more from Highball. But and do remind you that there is also an additional 12 interviews, extended interviews on that. Some that didn't even make the original film. Lee Carter is one example, and Ivan from Men Without Hats is another one on there. So there is some great extra content on there. So, but
On
more
Highball TV,
well, no,
highballtv.com.
but it's on the Blu-ray too. The Blu-ray and
Oh,
DVD
right.
is part
Sorry,
of those
yes.
extras. Yes. So
Yes. And highballtv.com has, you could subscribe as a subscriber and stream any of their content. They got lots of other content on there, but you can stream, and they do have some other extras, I understand.
yeah, I think the first one he told me was, and we mentioned this last week, was Metric extended interview there. But you can rent it to stream, and you can rent it to own, or sorry, buy it to own digital copy on the Highball site too.
Yep. And we talked about this book. So there is a book in the works, and it's going to come out for the 50th anniversary of the station. So that's pretty cool. A great team of people. And the people behind it just won an award, give you an idea of the quality and the workmanship that these people do. They just won the Best in Show at the Davie Awards, the Best in Show for Design and Print. And that's for the Gary's book, the
That
Gary
is
Top.
for the Gary Top. Yeah, he hijacked
Yeah.
my brain book, and if you own that book, you look at that and go, "Wow!" Like the cover, the way it's, I guess it's some kind of lamination process or just something that's really, really outstanding. It's the sort of thing you'd see in these like $150 or $200 plus box sets. Is on this book, plus all of the extras that were in that book, from the playing cards, the tickets and the flyers and the fold out timeline, all sorts of things that were on that. So those folks are working on our book, and we are very glad to be working with them. Now, we have mentioned this last week, but again, because it's a book, there are a lot of things that happen after all the content comes in that takes a long time. And believe it or not, we only have about 6 weeks left to get all of our content in. So if you're thinking about, like, you know what, I've got some ticket stubs that maybe people forgot about, or I've got, a flyer that the roadshow came to my high school, or I've got some old T-shirts, we'd love to see
Photos.
your photos of those ones. Please do not use a camera from 1999. The resolution is awful. We need sort of things that are higher resolution, but also too, if you have a story that you want to tell, like, sit down for half an hour and write out stories of your experiences. Like, oh, I went to 340 Main Street and I met the All Night Andre, or I met David Marsden, or the roadshow came to my high school, or we went to see, whatever, 999 out in Oakville, or we went to Hamilton to see Teenage Head or whatever. We want to hear those stories if they were somehow connected to CFNY.
Yes. And so there's a website. It's the 50th anniversary book website on, sorry, not website. It's on Facebook. There's a Facebook page. Just search for CFNY 50th anniversary book on Facebook, and you'll find the page there, and you can just post, tell the story there. You can also email them at uxbpress@gmail.com. That's uxbpress@gmail.com. So we appreciate it. Thank you. Look forward to that. Fall of 2027, I think, is the target date, is it?
Yes, we are hoping, fingers crossed. And, I look to our friends in Rush because, their R30, R40, and even this 50th anniversary of all being a little bit past their due dates. But ideally, we'd like to have it out for 10/21/2027. So
Yes, yeah.
hopefully we can do that. But you know what? If it goes the other way a little bit, I don't think we will be worse for wear on that. I think we'll be
No,
okay.
fair enough. As we know, we learned about documentaries. Things can be delayed sometimes.
Yes.
Just sometimes. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about. Oh, by the way, just on the episode this week, we're looking at the week of June 22nd to 30th, but we're going to talk a little bit more off the top in a second here about The Queen is Dead because it was such a huge album, and we kind of ran out of time last week to
Well, I
deeper
think
dive into
also
it.
I sat down on the weekend. I always sit down and watch it early on Saturday morning when it comes out or whatever. And I sat there and went, yes, we rambled on about Rush for a long, long time, but it was such an important thing. And we got more Rush to talk about this week. But, I said to Scott, we need to talk more about this because it is such a pivotal record of the 80s. So we are in part two of the Queen is Dead this week.
Yes. Plus, I have some clips from a Morrissey interview to play as well, too. So that's coming up. You did mention Rush, so I know you wanted to. It's hard not to because of this whole tour is just such a buzz, and it's everywhere on
Yes.
social media.
Well, they've moved out of LA finally after those 4 shows. They're in Mexico City this weekend, 2 shows in Mexico City. I got to say, I was tempted. I was really tempted.
Yeah, you were going to go, right? You were going to go down there.
I just saw this morning is there's still a few tickets left for that second show. And it's like, how can I get myself to Mexico City? And I was like, anyway, I'm not
I
going.
Wouldn't put it past you. I know you, Ivor.
Yeah, I have done those things in the past, but anyway, some interesting things have come out. And by the way, Rush Day, August the 8th, yours truly will be DJing, and I'm preparing some stuff around our documentary and a couple of guests to be a part of it. A couple of things that I thought about last week, or one of the things that we mentioned was, what do they play in the pre-show? Because that was always something that was interesting. Rush, what is over the PA, and that was Neil's domain. He always took care of that. So I reached out to our good friend Ray Wozniak, who was at the first 2 LA shows, and he said, all I can say is that Neil is still in charge. So they didn't change that. So you're getting you're getting a repeat of those old tapes that would have run 20 years ago. So there was
how cool is that?
Right. So so there was stuff from Jethro Tull, yes, Supertramp. I think there might have been some Gentle Giant and some Vandergraaf in there, and Camel and things like that. But those ones, they remain the same. So anyway, the other thing that has really come to light is, and they've I can't say they took a page from the Hip book because it's not an original idea, but the Hip, when they did their final tour, they played a selection of songs on that final tour every night that was different from the night before. They usually pulled out about 6 songs that they played on that Man Machine Poem tour across the country. And this is what Rush has been doing on the first 4 shows, is playing songs that they've never played before or have not played in decades, multiple decades. I mean, they pulled out some stuff that they hadn't played since 1979, and I think the second show. Now, and anyway, so I saw an article this week that a buddy of mine sent to me, and what they analyzed was, in the entire history of Rush, there's only 42 songs that the band have never played live out of their complete repertoire of about 165 songs. So I thought to myself, well, that can be the basis of what I play when I do my DJ set at Rush Day on the 8th of August at Henderson. But a couple of things, like from the self-titled album, Take a Friend. From the Fly By Night album, they had not played Making Memories ever. And from Hold Your Fire, Higher Water. And that album came out in 1987. And I went and did a deep dive on that record this week, and I was like, God damn it. That does sound a lot like the music that was being played on CFNY at the time. And I know that was kind of name checked in the documentary, that, there's some influences in that after the Permanent Waves record and Signals afterwards. But I
Yeah.
thought on this one, it was like, I line it up against some of those sort of synthy bands and some of these Rush albums that were happening in the later '80s. And I'm like, wow, there you can tell the influence on that. Of course, again, we go stand in the rock and roll corner that CFNY wasn't playing those Rush records in the later '80s, unfortunately. And damn it, they could have, but we can't change that now. But
Yeah.
anyway, the other thing that I saw this week was Variety had done a big feature. And I mean, I got to say, I mean, there's been so much mass coverage from every angle on Rush. But this one said that all of a sudden, Rush are for hipsters. And it was like, step aside, geese, circle back, turnstile, take five, and Viagra Boys. There's only one rock band that is unquestionably and certifiably cool, the cool kids' choice in 2026. And whatever indie cred the rest of you kids may carry, this town ain't big enough for both you and Rush. So anyway, but I was thinking also too about like this
Yeah.
Engine de Poitrine got a special breakthrough artist award given to them by Billboard last week, and who presented to them? Rush's publicist, Meg Simsick. So,
Cool.
and of course, the other thing they said that the most popular woman in America by default now is Annika Niles, right? Because everybody loves what she's been doing.
Yes.
And then the other thing they were talking about at the shows were like, Getty and Alex are used to it, but she was getting more cheers than they were because of what she could do on the drums.
I know.
So
And there's these pictures. You see some of these pictures. They've caught her, with a certain look at the guys, and there's little like kind of memes going on. Going, okay, guys, enough. All right, come on, let's go. Right.
well, the guy
So they're
from
obviously having fun.
this quote from the guy from Variety says, "I was madly, platonically in love with Annika Niles, who may immediately go down as the most rapturously accepted fill-in for a legendary departed musician in rock and roll's history of high-risk substitutions." And I'm like, oh,
Well
that's not,
said.
they're not wrong. He's not wrong.
I love that line. High risk substitutions. That's
So,
perfect. Oh
yeah.
yeah. Here,
So
here.
I
That's
mean,
good.
listen,
Yeah.
it's bringing in more fans. Like their streaming has gone through the roof. Their album sales have gone through the roof. I've seen them up now opt in, like people putting their the rankings of the top artists of all time, and they're right at they're right in the top 10, if not the top 5 now. And I'm like, right, because who else from the '70s right now has been able to come back and do what they're doing right now to a level that they've been able to do it, to go around the world and play what they're playing and mix it up every night and do it as well as they're doing. There isn't anybody else who can do that right now.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's anybody else from the '70s. Like Led Zeppelin will never come back and do that. Robert Plant doesn't want to do it.
Yeah.
Page is too old. Aerosmith ain't going to do it. 80s, late '70s, '80s, Bon Jovi's on the sidelines these days. So it's a truly wonderful thing to see this.
Yep.
And we
Yeah.
keep on keeping on.
It's going to be super exciting when they get to Toronto. Like it's going to be an awesome time. Because it's like, what is it? 4 shows, three, four shows,
Four shows
Yeah.
in Toronto. I mean,
Yeah.
it's the World Cup of rock now, and it
Yeah.
belongs to Rush. And
That's good.
yeah.
There's an Ivor quote. Let me write that on the World Cup of Rock, the Rush tour. I love it. Okay. That's a good one. Okay. You number one music fan that is Ivor Hamilton, always supporting and buying records. You're off to a show. What'd you buy this week?
So I went to the St. Catharines Record Fair. They have it twice a year, and it's a pretty good show. And unlike the Toronto ones, because I do go to the Toronto ones when my buddy Akeem and Aaron, who do the downtown Toronto record show, I've been going to that for 20 years or whatever, known those guys for 30 years plus. It's just not as crowded. But there's some good dealers that come in there. And the two things that I noticed at this one, though, first of all, the lack of 45s. And I love my 45s. And this one, there was literally one little stand with 45. Secondly, and I don't know what it is, but I guess maybe because Canada Day's coming up, or maybe it's a rebound from Rush. I don't know, but all of the sort of classic Canadian records, used Canadian stuff, all has gone up in price. It used to be when you'd go to those shows that you could buy Canadian records kind of on the cheap. Like you'd get them cheaper than, you know, let's say you were going, oh, it's Dark Side of the Moon with a poster, you know, some, you know, a Velvet Underground rarity or something along those lines, and they would be super expensive. Now a lot of these Canadian ones, I was going to buy an extras one. The guy wanted $40 for it, and I was like, I had a hard time. Like, you know, back then it would have been $6 or whatever. Not that I'm asking to pay 1983 prices or whatever, but anyway, I had a good time. I bought, you know, because it's World Cup, I bought a 7-inch copy of England New Order from the 1990 England World Cup theme
Okay,
song,
right. Yeah.
because I needed a 7-inch one because I usually play 7 inches when I do my DJ gigs. Two Cult Things Live in London, which was a Canadian pressing, Love Removal Machine extended mix, 12-inch Modern Romance. Remember the Queen of the Rapping Scene?
Yes,
You remember that one?
I have a copy of it. I used to like that silly song. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know,
With the accordion in it. I
yeah,
loved
I
it.
like that. It was
Yeah.
kind of like that European flavor
Yeah.
to it. And I must say, you know, it's not like uh, I didn't have. These are me owning these records for a second time, maybe a third time, because I play my records, and especially when I DJ'd, a lot of them would get beat up. But Tones on Tail Pop UB4, UB40, UB44, and that was the UK one that had the hologram sleeve. You know, if you remember that one.
Yeah.
Japan European Sun 12-inch. Now,
Cool.
Scott has this in his collection, and Ivor didn't. And that became apparent when we talked about this a few weeks back. The Rolling Stones 12-inch disco version of Miss You. I never heard
Yes.
that, Scott. So they had
Oh,
it there. I was
wow.
like, I got to have that.
How about that? Yeah.
Depeche Mode Behind the Wheel Route 66. Now, had it on CD, didn't have it on vinyl.
Okay.
And then the other one, which was an oddity, because I'm helping out a little bit with the Jam and their 50th anniversary next year, is they had a copy of, there was a double pack that I'd never seen before of the first two Jam albums. And they're basically, those two albums are kind of glued together, right? It's a fold out and it's 2-in-1. I was like, oh, that's kind of neat. And then the other thing that I ordered separately that just came in, and I haven't had a chance to sit down and enjoy it in its full Dolby Atmos, is the first two Stooges album on Elektra have been mixed for Dolby Atmos. Now, those are two records I'm like, huh? Those things in Dolby Atmos? But that's why I'm excited to sit down and listen to them.
Okay,
What I
which you
bought.
haven't done yet. That'll be interesting on Atmos. Like, yeah,
Yes.
you wouldn't figure the Stooges sound is the thing you would listen to an
Right.
Atmos
You kind of like,
production.
yeah,
Yeah,
you want to have some prog stuff, you know, an XTC
yeah,
album, a Kraftwerk record, a Floyd
yeah.
record, but not the Stooges. But as soon as I
Okay,
saw that, and they weren't that expensive. It was like $36 or something. I'm like, why not? Right? That's like less
yeah.
than most vinyl these days. So
No, that's cool. Okay, just before a couple of new concert announcements, just a couple of corrections from
yeah. So
last week.
so one from last week and one from the week before. We
Okay.
talked about the Big Bop last week, and I had mentioned last week that I thought Brother Bill had DJ'd there, and now and when I sort of when he told me, now I know I got it screwed up because they were very close together, and so he texted me and he said, Ivor, he goes, I didn't DJ at the Big Bop. I worked at Studio 69. And Studio 69 was located at King and Bathurst, and the Big Bop was at Queen and
Ah,
Bathurst. So,
okay.
you know, a minor one. He said he had a nice run there with Greg Williams, and I used to visit that club quite frequently. Now, the other one was from the week before, and I got confronted at the doc screening in Brampton by a listener who said that the Teenage Head footage at Edgefest was incorrect in the documentary, the Edgefest, because Frankie Venom had left the band. Now, Frankie Venom had left the band in, I think it was 1984 or early 85, but he came back later on. So Dave Rave took over, but Frankie rejoined the band, and he came back in 1988 and ended up staying until 2008, and he passed away not long after that. The footage in the documentary is taken from Edgefest in 1991. So we were actually correct on that one. So
Okay.
we,
Touche.
we corrected the uncorrected and all that good stuff. So
Yes. And the rare times we make errors,
yes,
it's
yes.
rare, very rare. Okay. Just before we dig into some of these milestones, just a couple of quick concert announcements that you wanted to
Yeah,
pass
there's
on.
a couple of new things. Let me just see what we got going on here. Digital Planets are coming to the Phoenix. They're going to be there on the 17th of October. Jane Siberry is at a place called Sellers in Newell, and I was like, "What is Sellers in Newell?" And
Hmm.
it's a independent bookstore,
Oh, okay.
672 College Street, and they have a concert space in the bookstore. I mean, Soundscapes used to have bands come in there and play. So I don't know if she's got a book coming out or not, but um, anyway, she's going
Yeah.
to be there, and your chance to see her in an intimate environment. That is on the 30th of September. Sloan are playing at the concert hall on November the 20th, and this week the Toronto Jazz Festival is kicking off from this weekend through the 28th. And next week, I do want to make an announcement that our special guest next week, Scott and I are going to be sort of taking a back seat on all the milestones, but our special guests are Humble and Fred. So what a rock foursome. Scott and Ivor, Humble and Fred together. It's going to be lots of fun.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. We'll definitely need more time for that one. Should be fun. Should be fun. Okay, that's concerts. Yeah, I was just thinking, there's a bookstore in town here, Paris, Ontario, where I live, called the Dog Eared Cafe, and they do little concerts and little things in there too, right on the river. It's pretty cool. Okay, so let's dig in. This is the week of June 22nd to the 30th. A little extra couple of days we're throwing in just to wrap up the month of June. Let's go into the 80s. All right, so this is a little bit of a continuation from last week as well. Let's say June 1986, the release of The Queen is Dead from the Smiths. This is a massive, massive record and ended up at number 2 in the year-end list. Last week I asked, geez, what was number 1? And it was So Peter Gabriel. And so the second on the list, which is listener voted, was The Queen is Dead from the Smiths. And good choice, everyone. Good choice.
I mean, you get these publications that were around back then, and then then they update them over the years, and they can go either way. I don't, Rolling. If they say, yeah, it's on Rolling Stone's greatest of all time list, well, if it's at 256, I don't care. But NME, for example, greatest album of all time on their 2013 list, makes a lot of sense, right? So this is why we sat down and went, you know what, we need to do more on this record. It is such an important record beyond what we said last week. The working title for the album was originally Margaret on a Guillotine. And
that sounds very Morrissey.
I mean, I think clearer heads prevailed once they got a little bit closer. But they were having, this being their sort of, their fourth record, and this they were having some real issues at that time because, dealing with Fame, they were having some real issues with Rough Trade at the time, who they didn't really have a great deal with. So there was renegotiation going on at the time. They did not have a proper manager at the time. They kind of did most of it themselves. And Johnny Marr was the guy who picked up the ball, and he was the doer of most things. And they had some people that worked with them, mostly women, mostly good women who were very organized in that, but they didn't have management people. For a short time, they had Madness as manager. But of course, the Smiths, maybe Morrissey. Well, I think that he will spend more time on Madness than he will on us. So we shouldn't have him. So off he goes. He gets paid, but they are back to renegotiating again, and lots of pressure because we need to tour, we need to do all of these things, and they were trying to finish this record. The first song recorded for the album was "The Boy with a Thorn in His Side." It was done as early as July of '85. Most of the songs were done at Johnny Marr's home in Bowden in songwriting sessions with Morrissey and Marr. At one point, Kirsty MacColl came in and she did a backing vocal on Big Mouth. They thought it was a kind of little bit lame, so it was rejected. in popular culture, The Queen is Dead laid the groundwork for later emo bands. And you think about that and going, yeah, where would emo come from? And that would be a huge influence on them. So now we talk about documentaries being delayed and books being delayed. This album was originally due in February of 1986, but because of various issues with rough trade and every other thing that was going on, it was delayed until June of that year. So, Scott, what do you got?
Well, it's funny. I came across some notes, the year end notes being on the air at CFNY, and I had a sort of year-end list of my favorites, and I found this little piece of paper where it was just scribbled, the Smiths, Queen is Dead, and it was in my top 10 somewhere, but it's the greatest band of all time, have never released a dud, including B-sides, and all of the extra tracks. It just, I just became such a super Smiths fan,
Mhm.
and I don't often, like you, I don't get into B-sides as much as you, but I got my hands and listened to, and especially those sessions, those John Peel sessions were amazing, right? They just
Oh, of
were,
course. Yeah.
right? Just everything
Yeah.
about them. I just love the Smiths, and yeah, just my at the time my favorite band in the world at the time, absolutely. So now, as you know, the Smiths played Kingswood. They played Toronto twice. It was 85, summer of 85, and they played again the summer of 86. So I was going to save a couple of the clips from the interview that I did with Morrissey at Kingswood, but I thought we'd play a couple of clips now.
Yeah. And we
I
also
don't know which
remember
one.
they did that one that Gary Top booked them in London, Ontario, too. And
Yes.
they rehearsed at Centennial Hall for an entire week because that was the first show. And that's when he called me and said, I need your help because FM 96 doesn't want to touch them. And he was so mad. And I was mad too, but we helped them sell out the show in a minute. So
Yes. Well, and interesting you say that. So I've got two clips here. One of the clips was me asking Morrissey about their lack of airplay in North America, and we had also talked about the fact that Kingswood, they had filled Kingswood the summer before, and that he had informed me that, or I guess I had found out that it was the biggest audience they'd ever played to. It's a massive stadium. They filled it. And here's a band that's, drawing crowds, but they're just not getting any, and they're selling records, but they're not getting airplay, and so that's one of the questions. And the other question was about, how soon is now, that became, from Ivor bringing it into the studio going, here's the new song, William, it was really nothing, great song. But on the B side, there's this, track, and then there's another extra track, and it was sort of an afterthought, extra B-side track. It's called How Soon Is Now, but holy shit, it's pretty cool. You guys should play this. And we did.
I will also say, I know we like to blow our own horn in this country about, oh yeah, Toronto this and Toronto that they were just as big in Boston. And they played out at Mansfield, which was basically the same size as Kingswood, and also sold that out too. Because that summer was when I became friends with the people at WFNX and
Yeah.
was down there at the same time. So
Yeah. And it's always still to this day puzzled me how great music that draws big crowds doesn't get a shake on the radio sometimes. Just never been able to figure all that out. Okay, so I don't know which clip this is, so we'll start with this one here. And this was an interview from, I guess, July 31st was the Kingswood show, I
okay,
think.
okay.
86, anyway. Yeah.
What about the state of radio in America? I mean, the Smiths are yet to be played on top 40 radio, haven't they?
Yes, which again is very, very confusing because it doesn't really quite seem fair. So, but nonetheless, I mean, I half expected it, I suppose. So, just merely another battle, but really, as long as the people come to see the group, we're quite happy because ultimately that's more important. Because I do know people, I do know groups who have become successful in a chart sense in North America, yet when they arrange concerts, people don't actually turn up. So it seems like there's several different worlds that a group can exist in. And therefore, if we must have one, or not rather if we must have one, but if we can have one, I think I'd rather have the one that we have now, because it's really most important. Because I think it takes a great deal for somebody to come out and buy a ticket and spend a night and sit and listen. I really do. It takes a lot.
I think tonight is a good example of Kingswood, because if you remember last summer you were here, and I believe up until that point, Kingswood was the largest audience you had played for. I think it was 12,000 that was here last year,
That's
and you
right.
get limited radio airplay in the area, and that says something, doesn't it?
Well, what does it say? I mean, isn't it a strange situation? What exactly do you have to do in order to gain that that A listing or whatever it is? What do you have to do? I think it's political. I really do think it's political, but that's okay. It just gives us something to fight against, really.
You know, it's interesting. I was thinking there, and it's so true. And you working for a record company later, Ivor, I was thinking, like, you get those bands that are played to death on the radio, selling records, and yet they can't draw a crowd. I think Berlin was one who had that big "Take My Breath Away," and they played, and they hardly drew anybody. So, you know, how do you explain that?
Oh,
You know,
there were a few of those that were that weren't ready for the stage, right? That weren't
right.
hadn't had a reputation. It's like these ones that were built in the studio, and in later years stuff that
Right.
came off of YouTube or you know, MySpace, and then later on into, you know, the currently into TikTok or whatever, and they're
Kind of
they
studio records kind of
yeah,
thing, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
they're
as you say.
studio things that are not ready for prime time. They didn't go out and pound the pavement and do all these, like, you know, built their reputation on these live shows. Again, that's, you know, where people get out there and build these things, and they build an audience without their radio play at the start, and then radio play made a difference. But of course now it's all changed, because radio does not play a factor anymore in very few shapes or form, with the exception of, you know, these days, like public radio, a little bit of you know, campus radio here and there, and country music for some reason still moves the needle with radio, but it's not something that
Oh, yeah, it's changed.
you know, in my last couple of years when I was still actively at the label thing, it's like, we wouldn't even talk. We talk a little bit about radio, but it used to be what was going on at Much Music, what was going on at MTV, and what was going on these top radio stations like The Edge, or what was going on at, like, oh, you got an ad at Chum, that's going to be great at Chum FM, but it didn't move the needle for a lot of these bands or whatever. And you know, we had many of them that you'd come in and you'd try and get people out to, and you're like, oh my God, maybe we'll probably never hear these artists again, unfortunately, right? So
So true, so true. Here's Morrissey on How Soon Is Now.
Here in Toronto, anyway, your most popular song is "How Soon Is Now," without a question of doubt. And maybe you can tell me a little bit about that song. Is it the making of that song?
The making of the song, really, I think it really simply deals with the very disturbing situation of being on one's own and going out and trying to make friends and going to clubs or wherever, which I used to do a great deal as a teenager. And I think it struck a common chord with many people, going out hoping to meet people, hoping to meet friends simply, but yet not really quite managing it. And so that really, in a nutshell, is the song.
Did you have any idea it would be as popular when you were making it? No?
No, because we put it as an extra track on a 12-inch record in England, and no, we didn't think it would be quite so popular. But then people began to write of it as the most important song that we had done, and I'll agree with that.
You know, I'd love to, if in terms of do you have that original 12-inch copy of William? It Was Really Nothing with How Soon Is Now on the B side, that first 12-inch that you brought into the station? I would love to have my hands on that.
I wouldn't have the station copy because the station had it, right? I wouldn't, like, the station played the shit out of it. That was theirs, right? So no, I wouldn't have the station copy. No. So I would, you know, I do have a 12-inch of it. What I'm looking for, and I don't think is the Francois Kevorkian remix of that one, which seems to have gone underground these days.
Yeah.
not
Yes.
available widely anymore. So
Yeah. And of course, the song itself, How Soon Is Now, was re-released as an A-side single, I think in 87, the following year, maybe, or later in 86. Anyway.
yeah.
Okay, so let's move on with the 80s. Next up, from June 1986, 5440, Vancouver's 5440, who it's great to see these guys are still playing, by the way. They, I don't know if that was the debut album, but it was the self-titled.
It was.
Okay, yeah.
Mhm.
The thing I was just going to say about that, they're playing some shows around Ontario. Just go to their website, 5440.com, because they're all over the place. They're playing down where you are, Ivor, Jackson Triggs, on July 3rd.
Right.
Yep. There's a few other dates, Kincardine, and then they play Toronto Danforth Music Hall on November 28th. But it's such a great album, lots of support on CFNY back in the day.
We were huge on that record, and they had a great string of records after that too. They had 3 or 4 really big records that they ended up leaving Warner and going to Sony, but the Sony put their full muscle behind that band, and it's nice to see them out there. And I Go Blind got into the Canadian Songwriters Songwriters Hall of Fame or whatever recently too. So and then of course they had a cover of that by Hootie and the Blowfish that would have helped the checkbook for them as time went on, right? And so there you go.
That worked out. Yeah. So I think at the end of the year, the CFNY end of year list, it was 29, which was the second highest Canadian entry. Chalk Circle had the number 1 at number 20, 5440. Okay. Next up is in June of 1986, the very first CD pressing plant in Canada goes online, which is kind of interesting because it's 86 and the CDs had been there's still a new thing, right? But CDs had been available for a number of years, but we were all buying imports. I don't think people realized that for
it took a few years. It took a while. I mean, I left CFNY in 88 and going to Polygram right away. And even at the end of 88 going into 89, they weren't full on CDs at that point. We were still servicing vinyl to a lot of the radio stations, going in with a 7-inch single or a 12-inch album, and certainly not on the Canadian things. It wasn't that widespread, and the whole perception that these CDs are quite a bit more expensive, and we're very frugal with that, and if you gave a CD to a radio station, that was a special treat for them or whatever, which, of course, in reality, it wasn't.
One copy. Yes.
It was dirt cheap to make CDs, But
over the years, I mean, isn't that one of the criticisms of the record companies, that they, overpriced CDs and
hugely in a big way. They were. I mean, but there was the other thing too, that with when the CDs, because there was much more time that you could put on the CDs, and you could go to up to whatever it was, 72 minutes, and then it even got up to like 78, 79 minutes or whatever, that people were going in and putting 25 songs on an album, and they'd have one song that got on the radio, and then people would go and buy the CD for $24 and get it home and go, yeah, it's got one great song on it. Great. So,
yeah.
And there was the whole movement to, the marketing movement to and I'll always remember the Cheerpool when the Daniel Calderon ran the Cheerpool, was like, take your turntables and put them down in the basement, because CDs are here and that's the way it's going to be. And of course the hip hop guys lost their mind. Like, we're not getting rid of our turntables. That's not going to happen. Right. But I mean, it was quite a transition. And as I've mentioned this on the program before, is like, I'd buy the imported CDs when they first started coming out, the same way I'd buy the 12-inch singles from Record Peddler. But Peddler didn't get into the CD stuff. They did initially, but it was only with a bunch of small independent labels at the time, and it took a while for them to get into a lot of the major label stuff, which they eventually brought in. But a lot of other places, especially hi-fi stores, would bring in import CDs. And of course the holy grails are like, if you get like a Japanese import CDs, and like the Beatles weren't available on CD forever. but they were out in Japan. And I remember I went down to Boston, and I went to Newbury Comics, and they had the Beatles. Abbey Road was there on CD, and so I bought it for the radio station, and we had a copy of Abbey Road on CD well before it was available to the general public in Canada. And we had a lot of those in our library at the time because I sort of built a network of places where I could get them.
So in your car, I remember I never got one of those multi-disc CD changers you could put in your trunk. I was one of those guys who literally, I think I carried a bag of just CDs all over the place, sitting on the passenger seat of the car, and I'm just shuffling through trying to find a CD. And I was like a single CD guy. I know people got those sleeves, like the plastic sleeves, and you took them out of the jewel cases and you put them in there. And I never got into that. But did you ever get one of those crazy CD changers? You could put about 25, 50 CDs in your trunk.
So I'll back the truck up here. First of all, I had a little CD player. My first one was like, you just put it right on the dash. It was a portable one. You plugged in through your car radio, and I had like, Velcro or something like that. Of course, skipped all over the place, right? But I was doing a lot of,
I forgot about those.
I had a girlfriend in Boston, so I was doing a lot of driving back and forth back in the day. So I had that. But then I also, I did have a binder, like, of course, it held 500 CDs. The giant binder had 500 CDs that you could put in, and I had those. And then I had another relationship with a girlfriend, and she got me for Christmas the 25 CD changer. So I had the home version of the 25 CD changer.
Oh yeah, at the home stereo. Yeah,
and then I had the 5 or 6 CD changer in the car, which I never
carousel.
I never
carousels. That was for the home, I guess, right?
Yeah, but you had them in the car too, which I had that. I didn't really like that much, because I was like yourself. I was like, God damn it, I want to hear this song, and it's like, if it's in the trunk, I can't get at it. So I was always wanting to have all these
It's
CDs.
so fun when you think about it today, because it's all digital, right? When you think of all these CDs, and I was not the most organized person, and I would get, here's what would happen when you've got enough CDs. I would put the wrong disc in the wrong thing, and I'm like, oh my God, I open up to listen to U2, and it's
not there, and it's
Duran or whatever. I'm what the hell?
Your Sarah McLachlan record that you keep pushing on me. But I went to a wedding in Jamaica, and I talked about this the same trip that I met Peter Tosh's mom, and I took the 500, the 500 whatever library of the, in the little sleeves. I took that down, and I had this like really cool blaster, and I had a mountain of import reggae CDs, and I took it down to Jamaica, and there I am on the beach, and there's my buddies all listening to fucking Kim Mitchell and Trooper records and Cinderella or whatever, and I'm playing all the reggae stuff down there, right?
Right.
Well, don't you know? Just know that all the Rasta guys all are coming over to me, going, "Hey man, can we buy the blaster off of you or whatever?" And they really wanted my blaster, but I was like, why do you have all these guys over there? Why are they? I said, well, they like my music or whatever, and that's how I ended up meeting, one of the guys from the Sandals Resort that took me to Peter Tosh's house. So there you go.
That's cool.
It doesn't pay to take Kim Mitchell records to Jamaica, right? So, but one of the guys who was with me because one of the guys who was on the trip with me, because it was a wedding, but he worked with me at Polygram, right? And he was Mr. Trade, right? Because the labels, we always used to trade back and forth, right? But he decided he was going to do that in Jamaica. So there he is going through customs. I go, why has Tony got so much shit, right? Well, he brought down like 100 CDs, and he was trading for CDs with everybody at the hotel, right? So they're the disco closed at the hotel. It's 4:00 in the morning. You couldn't get food to save your life. But there's Tony in the kitchen. The guy's frying him up burgers, right? Because he gave him all these CDs for everybody down there. Anyway, that's a whole different story.
For anybody that knows Tony, that's so Tony.
Absolutely.
I love it. I love it. Okay, we're still in the 80s here. 40 years ago, 40th anniversary for the Revenge album from Eurythmics. That had When Tomorrow Comes, Missionary Man, Thorn in My Side. Pretty good record.
Yeah, Grammy award winning record, and yeah, Missionary Man or whatever. It's funny, each week we go through these lists of things and we talk about certain records and we go, I don't think that one did very much. And it's like, maybe we should look that up before we do that. I'm like, oh, right. Go stand in the rock and roll corner because that was one of the biggest ones. So anyway.
Yeah, quick aside to that, I interviewed, I don't know if it was that album or another album, Eurythmics, go to the hotel room and I'm interviewing Dave Stewart, and he's got one of those big racks you see that bands use on tour, all the equipment, different, mixers and amplifiers and all these things on a rack in his hotel, giant rack of gear in his hotel room. And he's got the guitar out and there's a keyboard there and he's just working on tracks. And I think between our interview, he was just saying, I'm working on this. What do you think of this? I thought, God, this is cool. He was just such a cool dude. Dave Stewart.
It's some people like to have all their stuff with them, right? And I experienced that many times in my label years of the artists that go to, especially when they're out on the road and they got these big flight cases full of stuff. And I'm like, man, this guy just brought in half of his rec room in these flight cases or whatever, because they want a piece of home when they're out on the road, just to,
right.
Make them feel comfortable. Right.
It did feel like that. Also, 40th anniversary of the Discover album with Gene Loves Jezebel. This had Desire on it, Sweetest Thing, big tracks on CFNY.
Yeah, they went out and did, remember they did a big tour when that came out. They did with New Order and Echo and the Bunnymen. I remember and Warner had all three in the States, so they were marketing this promo compilation of these three bands out at the same time. And in 2026, Gene Loves Jezebel were here recently in one of Ed Sousa's Rockin' Classic Bowl shows.
Yes, that's right. Also, 40th of Camouflage, Stan Ridgway. This was the single from the album The Big Heat. Great album. And this song, Camouflage, really resonated. I remember getting so many requests for the song. We played it a lot on CFNY, and it just became a thing.
Yes, absolutely. And that is, it's actually one of those records that is basically being deleted now and is not available.
Wow.
But
you can get it on streaming services, I'm sure. I hope.
Luckily, thanks to yours truly.
Yes.
I'm not lying about that. My tenure at Universal, we were making these class of compilations, and this is 6 or 7 years ago. And so they said, Ivor, you should do the 80s stuff, right? And I said, oh yeah, I'll do the 80s stuff. And nobody paid any attention to me and what we were doing. And of course, they thought that I'd be making the biggest hits, the top 40 hits, the records that sold the most on these compilations. And I'm like, I'm not fucking doing that. So I did a whole.
They should know you better than that. Yeah.
Well, no, and for good reason. I wanted to make sure that the songs of that year that were of the CFNY eras were still represented. And so on the class of 86, if you go onto Spotify right now, you will find that song. It is not available on any other place under Stan Ridgway. That is the only place it's available right now is through that. And there's a number of other instances of other songs. And honestly, at the time, I didn't know that that's what happened. But, over the years, rights expire and they clean out their catalogs and stuff. And before I left, they had sent out a note throughout the company saying to all these people that did the playlists at the companies and said, these are not getting a lot of streams, but unless you feel otherwise, we're going to take these playlists down. And I said, do not take down any of these playlists, any of these class of, and I did it from, I think it was 1964 up until about the early 1990s. And then somebody, who was younger than me took over the other ones. And they're still up there. So I'm really glad that they're still up there. So you can still experience some of these songs, and some of them have now become hard to find, unfortunately. But you can't go on Stan Ridgway's onto Spotify as one example and find that on an album, but you can find it on this class of 86 compilation. So,
Ivor, thank you. Ivor.
Not
comes
blowing
through
my
again.
horn, but there you go.
There you go. That's great, fantastic. Oh, I love that you like that. The full 7-minute version of Camouflage is fantastic.
There you go.
Also, a 40th anniversary from Steve Winwood, the Back in the High Life album. Huge record.
Gigantic record, right? I mean, I don't know, if you
sold bucket loads.
If you take a look at 86 and kind of go, the Queen is dead, Peter Gabriel so not far behind, you maybe get Graceland by Paul Simon or whatever, and then this one is like, right up there at the time.
Yeah,
and it was a bit of
6 singles off of it. Yeah.
I mean, it was a departure for him because prior to that, he pretty much did everything himself as a solo artist. He did all the instrumentation, or he didn't have guests, but on this one, he did have a whole bunch of people, Chaka Khan, James Taylor, Joe Walsh, Nile Rodgers, all making guest appearances on this record. Made a phenomenal difference in things for Steve Winwood. And of course, he goes out and plays today. People still come and see him for those songs for the most part. There's still, of course, guys like myself who love his Traffic songs, who he still has in his repertoire, his live repertoire as well.
And also, I was just looking at the production on that record. It must have cost a fortune to record that album, because there's like 9 studios and so many people involved, like those guests you talked about.
Oh,
and,
yeah. But
right?
I was very
the return on investment, right?
I mean, listen, I've been to his house, so and I've seen the studio that he has in his house, and he did very well off of that, I will say.
Yeah, no doubt. Also, 40 years ago, the single "Happy Now I Know" from Breeding Ground, a great little track. This had the guest vocals from Molly Johnson on it, and it's just a great track. It actually got some, decent radio airplay on other stations, so that was good to see. Breeding Ground,
and that was on, I guess, Ready Records, or through the Fringe through Record Peddler and stuff at the time. So for a real small indie, that one did really well. And today, Molly Johnson is still making records, still signed to a major label, still signed to Universal Music, and still doing decent jazz records. And she's got a great following still. So,
yeah. Same week, this song called "Conspiracy, You'll Be All Right" from the Jazz Butcher. And I just wanted to play a clip from it because I had forgotten about this song. And I was like, okay, I know the Jazz Butcher. I think I know this song. And then it's like, when I listened to it, I was going, oh my God, I used to love this track and played it a lot on my show. Here is a little bit of that song. Not that one. This one.
Oh, what you gonna do when the floor caves in and everything turns as ugly as sin? You'll be alright. You'll be alright. What you gonna do when the bus breaks down and it's 4 a.m. in a foreign town? You'll be alright. You'll be alright.
Love that track. Okay, that's on the playlist. Put it on the playlist. Okay,
I will see what I can do, Scott. See if it's still available. That might not be one that might be one that's not available, but we'll get it sorted out anyway.
Okay.
I worked when I was at Polygram. I worked with Mr. Fish, the Jazz Butcher, very closely, and for a long time had a great relationship with him.
Okay, cool. Couple albums and tracks from the early 80s, so 45 years ago, the week of June 20th. Where are we now again? June 22nd to the 30th. So Little Red Riding Hood, 999. I remember when I was listening to CFNY before I worked there, I remember that got a lot of play.
Yeah, Sam the Sham cover. I mean, outside of Homicide, I'd say it's probably top 5 999 songs that we played on the radio station, and it wasn't a big hit anywhere else, but it became a big club song too. If you were playing sort of like your punk new wave at the time, that one would be, a second to Homicide.
Also, the 45th anniversary of the debut Tom Tom Club album from the Tom Tom Club.
Now there's
Great
one.
record.
There's one that's an innovative masterpiece of the era that kind of like brought punk and new wave together with the beginnings of hip hop, and it also, you get Chris Frantz and Tina Weymouth an opportunity to get outside the circle of talking heads, and what a great record it really was.
I was reading a little bit about this, and as there was a break from Talking Heads, that Chris and Tina just thought they needed to do something with their time, and so they recorded at Compass Point Studios, yes, in Nassau. So anyway, apparently So they did a demo first, and they only had 3 days. The record company said, okay, we'll give you 3 days at the studio. And so when they went there to do their demo for 3 songs, which was Wordy Rapping Hood and Lorelei and Genius of Love. Anyway, so they get there. Guess who's in the other studio? There's 2 studios at Compass Point. Guess who's in the other studio? Grace Jones.
Oh, she'll pull up to the bumper
recording the album Nightclubbing.
Oh,
so when they
okay.
did the demo, she's doing the album Nightclubbing in the next studio. How cool is that? And then the demo goes to Chris Blackwell, and he goes, this is great. Do a whole album. So they went back and did the whole album from the demos at Compass Point.
Yeah, that one hit it out of the park.
Oh, yeah. Great record. Bram Tchaikovsky played the Elmo. You were at this show,
Yes.
June 27th, 1981.
Yes, I was. I mean, I love the Motors. And prior to the Motors, the roots of the Motors were Ducks Deluxe, which I own their records, one of the start of during the pub rock era. So Bram Tchaikovsky was in the Motors temporarily, that first record, but he did not get a lot of attention as far as like his contribution to the song writing in the band. And so he had an opportunity to do something on his own, and he ended up doing 3 records. And I got to say, his records were probably equally as good as the Motors, even a little more. They probably had even a little more edge to them than the Motors records did. Unfortunately, they didn't go to the next level. CFNY played Bram Tchaikovsky a lot. But he ended up breaking up the band after 3 records and left the music business. But I met him. He came to the radio station. Great guy, great performance live. And then of course I saw him play with the Motors as well. So
a show we were both at. So just a few days later, it's June 29th. 1981, Stiff Little Fingers at the Elma Combo. I think this would have been their first show here, right?
It was.
Yeah.
It was absolutely their first show. And Ed Sousa, you can still bring them back. Ed, if you're listening, I've only mentioned this to you like 30 times. They have not been to Canada in a long time, but they have toured across the country many times. So they're based in Chicago. It's not that hard. Please do it, Ed. You can do it. Talk to Lou Molinaro down in Hamilton and get it done.
Yeah, Ivor and I talked about this show before, and still one of my favorite concerts of all time. Absolutely blistering energy that night. It was just an amazing night at the Elmo. Amazing band.
I was thinking about this, going, okay, what were I was at the Elma Combo. It seemed like my weekends back then were like, my whole life rotated around going to the Elma Combo, the Edge Club, and Larry's Hideaway back then for concerts. And I thought, well, who were my best shows ever at the Elma Combo? And I will say that Stiff Little Fingers was my number 2, but it was one of my most memorable shows ever at the Elma Combo. I absolutely loved it. My favorite one ever was when George Thorogood played there for the first time. It was like he absolutely tore the roof off the place. There was never to be topped. But Stiff Little Fingers was my number 2 show, and I always loved them after that.
Yeah, 100%. Also, 1981, 45 years ago, the Party album from Iggy Pop is released. That ended up number 4 in the year-end list at CFNY. Ivor, your favorite record? No, I'm just kidding you, because I know you I
didn't dislike it, but it was, it was Iggy Pop light to me, right? Like he had this deal with Arista Records, and you record for Arista Records, and you've got the promo people and the A&R people. We need radio hits. We need you to smooth things out for radio and that. And that's what this was, his contractual obligation, his 3rd record for Arista. Yeah. And that's what he got. And even though they had Ivan Krall helping with the songs and some very well-known, alt musicians on that, to me, listening to that record, I mean, Pumping for Jill, give me a break.
Okay. So Pumping for Jill, now that's the track I love off this record. And you know what it kind of reminded me of? I know it's a different vibe, this album, as you point out, but it kind of reminded me a little bit like Lou Reed, a Lou Reed vibe, and Pumping for Jill and Bang Bang. I don't know.
As I said, I don't dislike it, but I would never put the record on. I would never put those songs on. I'm going to listen to Pumpin' for Jill. I am not going to listen to Pumpin' for Jill. And you see Iggy live. You see what he did live and how much those songs. I don't even know if he played those songs much live, but he was a completely different animal when you saw him play live than what was on that record.
Right.
And to me, Iggy Pop would have been better represented with something that would have been a little bit more edgy. But it is what it is, and that was what he dealt with at the time on his contract with Arista, and so be it. I mean, you think of those earlier records that trio of records that he had, that David Bowie was involved with, and they sound very, very different than this record.
Yes. Okay. Fair enough. All right, we're going to go back a little bit earlier. Let's move into another decade. All right. Now, just before we do the 70s, we don't do the 60s very often, but we thought we'd mention this because it's an interesting date and show for a couple of different reasons. So June 22nd, 1966, so 60 years ago, the Byrds play at Varsity Stadium. This is billed as, get ready for it, it's called the Rockin' Soccer Night. Who came up with that term? Isn't that brilliant? Sitting around a boardroom going, hey, let's call it Rockin' Soccer Night. So they actually had a soccer game plus 4 bands, the first time that the Byrds had ever played Toronto, and also 30 go-go girls. There you go.
Oh, yeah.
And what's cool about it is this was the first biggest outdoor concert ever in Toronto.
Just
Apparently.
remember in Spinal Tap, right? Remember in one of the shows they played, it was Puppet Show plus Spinal Tap, right? If you remember that, right? So yeah, having a soccer game, having a pony show, having whatever. Yeah, I mean these were people trying new things back at the time. So let's get the band out. The thing is, at that point, they had the Turn record that had come out about 7 months earlier, which had a bunch of top 40 hits. They were just on the cusp of releasing an album called Aquarius that was coming out about 3 weeks after this concert, and that had 8 Miles High on it, and I See You, which were completely, acid influenced, like psychedelic rock. So I didn't see that. I don't think there's a set list out there. At least I didn't go chasing it down, but it would have been really interesting to see what the reaction was to the show that night.
Oh yeah, for sure. And just talking about soccer, we talked at the opening of the show. We're obviously deep into the World Cup and that. And how have you been taking some games in, Ivor, and thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really sort of getting into it now. I mean, I was a little hesitant at first. Obviously, I watched the first Canadian game, but I've been watching, some of the minor games, but the big, the big ones. And certainly you see all the stuff that's blowing up on social media. I mean, I laughed my head off at the Scotland thing, and like how the Scotland fans taking over Boston completely and drinking the bars dry in Boston. Like seriously, like these bar owners are just going, this is a town that's like, with an Irish background that has one of the biggest St. Patrick's Day crowds in the world that comes out for those celebrations. And these guys put it to shame coming in, right? But then I see in Vancouver, the Australian fans did the same, drank all the bars dry in Vancouver. But I'm seeing, like in Vancouver, it said one bar said, well, our sales are up 1,600%. So and so they're going out, and like I said, there's one bar in Vancouver because I had to get our DJ in his van to go out and buy like 20 more kegs of beer so we can just keep up with all of this. We're hiring more staff. So economically, it's quite good that these things are happening. But I'm loving the atmosphere that's going around. And then you see the Ghana game in Toronto that just happened, and it was raining, but the king of Ghana was there, and they took over Yonge Street, all the Ghana fans after their big win and that. So the atmosphere is phenomenal. And I don't have many friends that are at these games, but I did. One friend of mine was at the Croatia England game in Dallas, and he's originally family's from Croatia, and I'm like, how did you get to that game? He goes, well, I got a relative that in Croatia that they belong to the Croatian Soccer Foundation and they got access to tickets. So there he goes from Toronto down to Dallas with my buddy from Vancouver. Johnny's Croatian, and Mark is English. So they were posting their pictures, the English fan and the Croatian fan together. They went to the game, and they're probably a lot poorer for it, but they're having the time of their lives. So if you can do it, do it. I am wearing, if you're watching on YouTube today, my Motorhead Canada t-shirt.
Yeah.
The Motorhead merchandise or website has made t-shirts in every participating major country in the World Cup. So they just change it. Motorhead Mexico, Motorhead Ghana, Motorhead Holland, whatever you want.
That's great.
And I got the t-shirt in 2 days, so I was happy about that. So anyway, I think it's great. I'm having a great time. This is, my first World Cup during retirement, so I'm putting things off for World Cup games. So
yeah, no, fair enough. Yeah, the only thing, and I don't want to go down a negative route, but I don't watch a lot of soccer or football, and watching it, I watched the Canada game, but seeing again these guys that are pretending they're injured and diving, they still have this. Like, have they not corrected this by now? Could they not fine them if they're not really hurt? Then I feel bad for the guys who really get hurt, because half the time they're ignored because, you're just faking it, right? So it's such a funny thing about the sport, right? And when you see hockey players, right, with missing teeth and bleeding, and off they go and they play the next period,
So these guys that I follow, they usually do hockey, like these hockey joke videos, but they did a soccer hockey joke video, and it's like, a leaf falls off a tree and the soccer guy falls down like, oh my God, my knee or whatever, right? And then the hockey guy's like, you got a broken arm, you got a broken ankle, and you've lost 4 front teeth. Because, well, coach, I got to get out there still, right? Like, cares,
and they
right?
do, and they do, and but they show it in slow motion sometimes, and it's like, there's an elbow in the face or something, and the guy, he's converting on the ground, and it's like they hardly touched you.
Yeah.
Like, anyway. I just find that silly, unfortunate, but I do think, the fans, that says so much, what you say about the fans and the support and how much fun everybody's having with World Cup.
It's a great experience, and you forget about it, but now it's full on, and people from all walks of life, they're just like, it doesn't matter where you're from, and somebody's supporting a soccer team, and it's just really fun that it's here in this country, or pieces of it are here in this country. I will say that those American stadiums put ours to shame, but whatever.
That one in New Jersey is impressive.
The Dallas one too, and they get 80,000 people inside air conditioned. I mean, they're quite incredible. But regardless, we've got the spirit. We've got people that love the game just as much, and it's great to see those people that are here from all around the world who've come to support it. And why not? People are just, they're doing it for their love of the game, and they're doing it for the love of their country. So why not? Game on.
All right, let's roll through some 70s here. So June 25th, 1971, the release of "Move On Up." Curtis Mayfield stands as one of the greatest tracks of all time.
I don't disagree. I mean, there was a time during the 1980s. There were a few of us at the CFNY, myself included, who loved Motown and who loved soul music in general. And I used to try and put some of those things on the air, and we used to have some of those sort of like throwback weekends that, especially when Don Burns got there, and we would put in music from other eras, and I love that. And of course you have those bands that like the Haircut 100 and Modern Romance and a few other ones that sort of like were Dexies that were really, their roots was soul music. So the Jam covered "Move On Up" at one point in 1982, which was a very, very
or was it Style Council?
No, it's a bit of both, right? It was first put out by the Jam, and I think it ended up on a Style Council compilation too, or whatever. But it was the Jam who did it. But they were very close to the original, but I never, I've got a handful of songs from that sort of Northern soul era that I never get tired of. Is like, and one is the Isley Brothers, That's Lady, Who's That Lady, and Move On Up by Curtis Mayfield. And there's so many other songs by Curtis Mayfield. I love the impressions and soul music. Every once in a while, my NY the Spirit show, I'm like, to hell with new music. I'm going all soul, right? And so
Cool.
Curtis Mayfield
Good.
will always be a part of that. So
Here's another big one, 55th anniversary of the Blue album from Joni Mitchell, which still today, think about this, it is 55 years and it still sits at number 3 on Rolling Stone magazine's 500 greatest albums of all time.
yeah, I mean, it's for me, it's one of those things. I mean, I certainly remember at the time. I mean, that record got top 40 airplay with, This Flight Tonight and Carrie, and there's one or two other ones on there that you would have heard on, certainly on FM radio at the time. But it's amazing to see that global respect that people have for Joni Mitchell. And obviously she was at the Junos this year to get special Lifetime Achievement Award, and that.
Yes.
It was wonderful for her to finally come back to Canada and acknowledge that.
Yeah, I put the album on. I was seeing some friends in Burlington last night, and on my way back, and then it's raining, and I thought, oh, this is good for Joni Mitchell and this album. And I played it, driving in the car, and it was like, wow, this still stands up. It just sounds amazing. She's on another level.
Yeah, I mean, in the last couple of years, especially when I got here to Niagara on the Lake, and I put was putting the vinyl collection back together. When I was at the other place, it was all there, but it was because of the way the setup was of the house. Things were in corners and around corners and things like that. And here everything is much more easily organized. But I realized I was missing a bunch of stuff from my collection that I needed to fill holes with. I'm like, why don't I have these Joni Mitchell albums? Why don't I have these records in my collection? So I went on a big buying spree, and I didn't have Blue in my collection. I now do have Blue in my collection because it's like, I gotta have that record. Like,
Yes.
just do, right? So.
No, good for you. Interesting, I was looking at the Rolling Stone magazine 500 greatest albums of all time. And here's what's interesting. And this is the most recent time they did this was 2021, I think. So just recently. Do you know there's only in the top 10, they're all from the 60s and 70s. There's only 2 that are not from the 60s and 70s in the top 10. Isn't that something? What does that tell you?
It doesn't surprise me. I just, I think, I know, Scott, you talk about Rolling Stone a lot and these things. I don't take their lists as with as much seriousness as you do on those things because of things like that. I'm like, well, don't you think it's time to move on and give a chance to, it's like the new music that, you're kind of like going, oh, well, I don't want to be stuck in the 80s. And like we talk about these things, but I always still listen to new music, and I always think, what, this is, whatever, these records that come out and going, yeah, these are some of the greatest of all time. And it's like, well, music didn't stop after the 1970s, and great music didn't stop after the 70s and 80s. So there's reason that, like, well, we should, don't you think that, like, even from the 90s, I don't know, is Nevermind in that top 10 list? I don't know, by Nirvana. I mean, so to me,
and it isn't.
So what the fuck is the problem, and where's, how do you come up with those things, right? And it's like, this whole the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and all the bands that haven't got in, and you're just like, oh my God, but at the end of the day, it's like, life's too short, and you just move on, and you in your own mind know what these great records are, and there's always going to be some that are criminal that aren't acknowledged.
Yeah. Well, on that note, there was a lot of criticism in this last time they did this update, like 21 or whenever it was. There a lot of really good records got really bumped either out or way back in the list. So they got some criticism for that, which is interesting.
It's like, it's like if it's, let's just pick one out of the sky. It's like, where does Black Sabbath Paranoid sit? If it's sitting at number 398, then I got a problem with that, right? But ahead of, like, the Flying Burrito Brothers, or if they're sitting at like number 26 or Graham Parsons, is like, well, I think millions of fans would disagree with you guys, but
Yeah.
Anyway, it's Rolling Stones. There's always been issues with things like that with them, and they're, and then the whole Rock and Roll Hall of Fame thing is really the last couple of years they've kind of backpedaled and gone, well, it's not really the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We call it that, but it's the Music Hall of Fame because of the hip hop and whatever other pop singers that get in there now, and I understand that. So
yeah. Just very quickly, the only two records that are not from the 60s and 70s in the top 10 on the last list was Purple Rain at number 8, and The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill is at number 10 from 1998.
Right.
Okay, let's move on. Shaft, the film, comes out 1971. Also, of course, had the theme song from Isaac Hayes, which was a huge hit.
Knocked John Lennon's Imagine out of the number 1 position, believe it or not.
Did it?
At the time.
How about that?
And it set the stage, Shaft, for blaxploitation movies that black businesses did very, very well for a long time at that point. And he was, they called him the Black Moses, Isaac Hayes, and he was on top of the world for a long, long time. I mean, he was it, right? You'd have your Stevie Wonder and your Marvin Gaye's, but Isaac Hayes, man, he was fantastic.
Absolutely. Won't Get Fooled Again. The Who, look at that, 50 turning 55.
Well,
what do you say about that song, right?
Well, I mean
there's so much. Like we could do a whole show on that.
The synthesizer on that sort of synth through whatever that was fed through a Lowry organ, and it just was like that kind of pulse track when you first heard that, and going, I never heard anything like that. You get Keith Moon's drums, and you're just kind of going, oh my God, right?
Just how that kicks in, eh?
It's one of the, and it was like basically their live finale for their shows. It doesn't get any better than that. Now, I had the opportunity, because I had a somebody who became my friend who wasn't Canadian, who came from the Middle East, and so she doesn't know shit as far as like music from that era goes. Never heard it. She was exposed to Arabic, Middle East music, and I'm like, let me play you something. Let me play you this really loud, and I want it like it because she had never heard it again.
Wow.
And I mean, because I know Alan Cross has this thing. He's got like, oh, I'm playing so and so for the the naive opera singer, and I said, well, I'm going to play this from my friend for the Middle East or whatever, and I played her Won't Get Fooled Again. She loved Pete Townshend's scream at the end, right? We won't get fooled again. I was like, oh yeah, right. So that was great.
Or Daltrey's scream, or was that who's, I don't know, who's the scream in that? I figured it was Roger.
Well, sorry, Roger scream. I should have said that. And then and I can't remember the song, and I know somebody will chime in on this on our socials or whatever, but Kiss uses that line in one of their songs, and when they played live too, they would just take the scream and use that in one of their songs, which really was great too.
Yeah, there's so many things about that song. You're right. The scream is one of the greatest rock and roll screams of all time. I was just thinking of that Jimmy Fallon and the Roots. Remember when they did a version of? Did you see that? They did a version of that with the classroom instruments thing.
Oh yeah, I mean,
it's on YouTube. Fun. It's pretty funny.
Yeah.
It's pretty funny. They're good sports doing that.
We always used to joke, at Universal, that our chairman at the time, Randy Lennox, he just loved Who's Next or whatever, right? But he'd always reference it, right? Blah, blah, blah. Who's next? We're going to put it on sale. Who's next is going to put it on sale? Buddy, we got to move more Who records, right? So
talking about festivals, we had that Rockin' Soccer Night. There was also one in 1971, June 26th, the Beggars Banquet Festival at York Stadium. And this had Steppenwolf, Beach Boys, Blood Rock, Bread, Lighthouse, Alice Cooper, and the tickets were $4 and $5.
35,000 people attended. They did three of them that summer. There was I think it was one in June, one in July, and one in August, and all with. This one seemed to have the better names on the bill. The other ones were good. The second one they had Black Sabbath on it, and they advertised it as a dance. Oh, you're going to go to a dance with Black Sabbath. Fantastic. They're my favorite dance band. They lots of slow jams, dancing to War Pigs or whatever. Right. So,
I'm thinking of Bread between Alice Cooper and Steppenwolf.
Yeah, well, I gotta say, when I was in high school and senior public school, there was a lot of female bread fans. Like, they
Yeah,
loved the ladies loved bread back then.
that's
So
true.
that's
That is
probably why bread was on the bill.
that is true. Hey, listen, let's go into the mid 70s for a second. So 50 years ago, believe it or not, this is the week that the CN Tower opened to the public. That we had later on at CFNY, we had a studio up there at one point, and everybody has a CN Tower memory.
Yeah.
Ira, do you have a memory?
Well, I just remember when they were building it, and I was
Yeah.
fascinated when they were building it, and you could see it going up, from the start when it was just in its infancy, but once it really started to climb, and very vivid memories of that Sikorsky helicopter they had to bring up from the States to bring put the crane up there,
Yeah. A lot
way,
of people
way up
watched
there.
that. Yeah, that was a cool thing.
Yeah,
Yes.
I thought it was great. I was fascinated by heights back then, so I couldn't wait to get up there. I was, when we took family trip downtown, like, oh, Mom, can we go up the TD, whatever the TD Tower or whatever it
Yeah.
was, the 57 stories, and then the Bank of Montreal one went in at 70 stories, and I was like, this is all great. So yeah, I quite enjoyed that whole, the whole history of it at the start. And then of course you go up and it's windy and it's like, oh, it's swaying, and then you can look down the plexiglass, and that's, I mean,
I can't do that. That plexiglass
oh,
thing.
I know that's
I can't. I had to crawl over it. That's the only way I could do it.
they I've been to Thailand a couple of times too, and they've got some 90-story buildings in Bangkok that you can walk along the plexiglass, and I'm like, I don't think I'm going to do that, right? And I just and they go, don't worry, these things can these you could be as heavy as a Volkswagen, and you wouldn't have to worry about it because these things are strong. And I'm like, yeah, I'll be the first exception to go right through the floor or whatever. Right?
Oh, gee. Well, of course, the musical connections. We talked about the Technique Showcase Studio. I think Depeche Mode came up there for an interview once, and there was craziness.
It was honestly, I mean, Jim Reed did the interview at the time, and I was there. I guess I was just helping him out at the time, but it was teen pandemonium. I mean, I think that the security people at the tower were overwhelmed that day because so many Depeche Mode fans showed up for that interview. And that Technique studio was tiny, right? So it wasn't exactly conducive to having a studio audience in it. But that day, they were all there.
Yeah. Also, Nova Heart from the Spoons, if you have the cover of that old 12-inch, there is a couple of photos that were taken at the CN Tower, and those little kind of portal windows that look out from the tower out to the city. It might have been that upper deck, I think, that took those pictures.
Yeah, that was always cool, because you had to pay extra. Well, I guess you still do, to pay extra to go up to that, whatever it is, 1,100 feet or whatever. And I think I was only up there once or whatever. But, I will say that, as we got into the 80s, once CFNY got up on the tower, we probably had too many promo photos of CFNY Tower stuff, right? Every time you're doing a promo with CFNY, there's the CN Tower in the background. CN Tower, whatever. All right, we know.
A shout out to Don Burns, aka Dr. Trance, and DJ Ian, and all the crew of the Atlantis Rave Company who put on the Vertigo Rave at the CN Tower in October of 93. That was a memory. That was a pretty cool event. Don, and as you know, Don, you work closely with Don in the music department in that. Boy, he had a way of talking to people and convincing them things. So somehow he got to the CN Tower management and people and said, we're going to have, what they did with a lot of these raves back in the day, Ivor, is they told them they're just doing a video shoot.
Oh,
that's what they said. Yeah, we're going to have all these kids and we're doing the music. There's going to be DJs and we're doing a video shoot. And they go, okay, can we rent the CN Tower for that? Okay.
Well, everybody weren't as cool as you and Don got, right? How these guys who work in these union shops or whatever, how are they supposed to know, right? They would have, if we were saying we're doing a sock hop, they would have said they needed a permit for a sock hop. David would call it.
Yeah. Okay, 50 years ago, a John Anderson. I'll be all right. John Anderson of Yes releases his first solo record.
Yes, that to me, was a real sort of progressive masterpiece at the time, and it ended up doing better than all the other, the Chris Squire record and Steve Howe records that had come out. And John did all the instrumentation on the record himself. There were no people kind of think, maybe that was Vangelis on there, or Vangelis or whatever they call him. But it was John doing all of the instrumentation on that, and it looked at as a progressive classic from the time.
Yep. Elias of Sun Hillow, right?
Yes.
Also, 50 years ago, You Should Be Dancing, the single from the Bee Gees, comes out. And here's a little known fact, everybody. Do you know that song was partly recorded in Quebec? Very cool.
Well, I do know the other studio that they were working at, Criteria, at the time, that, we talked about, Grace Jones being there when the Tom Tom Club was being made. Well, the Stills Young Band were there in the studio at the same time as the Bee Gees were. And so Stephen Stills plays on that song, like You Should Be Dancing, as does most of the Stills Young Band without Neil Young are playing on various tracks on the album. They were just making their record in the other studio. They all got talking and said, yeah, we'll help you out. So they are on the album that had You Should Be Dancing, which of course was the song that pretty much started the disco era at the time.
Yeah, pretty much. So that's interesting. I hadn't heard that story. And it's funny because over time, you and I both in the music business and hearing stories and researching stories, there's so many instances like that where, a recording studio has an A and a B and a C studio, and they don't know that this other band or artist is going to be there at the same time. And they've had these collaborations happen where it's like, oh, hey, you're down the hall. Hey, do you want to sing backup on this?
I mean, somebody's out having a coffee, then there's usually a little common area. And it's like, oh, what band are you? Oh, you're, hey, what are you guys working on? Come and hear what we're working on.
Yeah, totally.
Hey, I would do this. And it's like, so great. I think it's great that these things happen, right?
Yeah.
So.
Here's an interesting one. So 50 years ago, it's June 25th, 1976, Elvis Presley is playing the Odd in Buffalo. What's cool about this particular show, and a lot of people from Toronto went because there was only once that Elvis ever played Toronto, which was way back in 1957. On April 2nd, Elvis did 2 shows. That's the only time Elvis played Toronto. So I think there was only 3 times that Elvis played Buffalo, and this was the last time that Elvis was in the area for anybody to see Elvis Presley.
He was, but oddly enough, in doing the research for this, and I didn't know this until we said we were going to put this on the agenda, but the year before in 1975, he played in Niagara Falls at Niagara Falls Convention Center as well on the U.S. side. But that to me would have been like, oh, that's also, another great opportunity. It turns out that date in Buffalo was one of the most full shows ever at the Odd. They jammed 18,000 people into the arena for that show. Now, to put things in perspective, the Buffalo Sabres who were there, they barely were able to ever fit capacity of about 14 to 15,000 at the time. So to have 18,000 in there for Elvis was a really big deal at the time. I was told that it was in and out. He had his own private plane at the time, so there wasn't a lot of opportunity for people to have much interaction on that. But
this is a classic example of Elvis has left
the building. Yes, this would have been true to form when they say Elvis has left the building. It's me when whenever I go to an event, I never stay around to say goodbye. I just get the hell out. Whereas my other friends, my buddy Frank, he stays because he's Italian. He stays till 4 in the morning to say goodbye to everybody, not me.
You do the Irish exit or whatever.
Absolutely, I do the Irish exit every time. Now, he did, and this was, in his set, but it kind of was heartening to me that he covered. He did a Gordon Lightfoot cover in his set.
Really, at that show?
He did the Early Morning Rain. Yeah.
No kidding. I would never have imagine that in a million years. That's interesting.
And the show grossed 225,000 on ticket sales, an all-time high for the event on that evening. So it was
225,000 US in today's dollars, eh?
Yeah. So so that would have been quite significant. So I put it in our playlist. You can hear Elvis doing Gordon Lightfoot's Early Morning Rain. So
okay, love it. That's great. All right, let's just do some birthdays before we move on to a couple of other milestones. Okay, let me just roll off a few people celebrating birthdays this week. Chris Isaak turns 70. Derek Forbes of Simple Minds fame. He's no longer in the current lineup and touring band of Simple Minds, but Derek Forbes was a original member. Turns 70. Jimmy Somerville, Bronski Beat, turning 65. Bobby Gillespie of Primal Scream is turning 65. And also Kurt Smith of Tears for Fears turning 65 this week. Happy birthday to all.
Way to go, guys. Chris Isaak, went back and listened to Chris Isaak today, also on our playlist, but he still sounds current. I think his stuff still sounds good. He's doing a big European tour this summer. Derek Forbes, some facts for you that he was in Simple Minds twice, and he created the bass line for Waterfront, which is, obviously one of their most unforgettable songs. And I meant to say too that Simple Minds did a 1-year shout out to Canada in their website this week. Just said, we were here at this time last year, did a show up in Quebec, and came down and played at the RBC stage at this time last year, and just said how much they love Canada, and again acknowledged the start that Canada gave them in building their career in this part of the world. So
that's awesome. Oh, and by the way, Ivor, Scott's finally going to a concert.
Besides, Ed
Sheeran? Yeah. So Simple Minds just announced, this is, of course, Derek Forbes is not in this current lineup, but Simple Minds just announced their only UK show. It's in Scotland at the time that I'm there, so I'm going to see Simple Minds. So it's the BBC Radio 2 in the Park in Stirling, Scotland, featuring Simple Minds, Level 42, Deacon Blue, James Blunt, Cast, and a few others.
When's that happening?
So that is the September 13th.
Ah, very good.
Yeah.
So you're
maybe you could come over. We'll go.
Well, right. I could extend my trip because I'm supposed to be coming back from Spain on the 11th of September. So maybe I could just say, well, I'll fly to Scotland on the way back and see the show.
Yeah. All right. Let's discuss. Discuss. Okay. Some people who we have lost in the past week. A gentleman by the name of Stranger Cole. When I saw that, I'm like, Stranger Cole? Ivor, who's Stranger Cole?
Is a reggae pioneer, one of the forefathers of ska music, along with Hedley Jones Sr. And I kid you not, that Hedley's father was one of the founding fathers of reggae and ska, but he was one of the pioneers of ska music. He collaborated with Duke Reed, best known for a song recorded in 1968. He moved from Jamaica to the UK for a short period, then moved to Toronto, and you have to pay the bills, so he worked at the Tonka toy factory. But he also opened the very first Caribbean record store in Kensington Market in Toronto as well. So will be greatly missed, and was hugely influential on the reggae and ska scene.
Yeah, so apparently there are two records considered the very first reggae records. One of them is called Nanny Goat by Larry Marshall, and the other is this song, which was created by Stranger Cole. And this is a cool track. Check it out.
Okay.
Love that sax. It reminds me of saxa and English
beat. He was a rough rider.
Right,
English beat.
Totally right. I'm like, this is a great track.
Speaking of that, I just we've been having a ton of stuff getting digitized of old CFNY air checks and all these other things, and we've got air. Excuse me, damn.
Yes.
We got one of the English Beat concerts that we recorded for Thursday Night Live, and man, the atmosphere on it is so great. You can just feel the energy in the room, much like Gary Cormier described in the documentary, and how
100%.
powerful
Yes.
they were live. And so this
Yep.
English Beat show that I got access to was like, wow, this is great. There's probably this whole batch of stuff I was sent. I probably had about 10 of the CFNY recordings, and so far that English Beat show is probably the best of the bunch. And there's 2 Strangler shows, which I didn't realize that we recorded them twice, but the second one was really, really good too.
You're talking earlier about we were both talking about our favorite shows of all time. So, Stiff Little Fingers, of course, El Macombo, but seeing English Beat at the concert hall back in the day. Oh, absolutely.
I remember that one of the earlier shows that they did, it might have even been a day or so or 2 days before they did that first show in Toronto, they played at Arundel College. And I remember lining up to see, they did a show at Arundel College. And again, there was these odd shows that would happen, like these student associations would book these. And I went to Arundel College to see the English Beat. Fuck, it was great. It was so good.
Awesome. Oh, that's fantastic. Okay, let's do the 90s. All right. Just going to roll through the 90s, 2000s really quickly because we're running a little long here. First of all, let's talk about it's been 30 years ago since the debut album from Jay-Z, the Reasonable Doubt album.
And that was a real sort of indie hip hop record, one that they did themselves. And that's where, he was selling records out of the back of his trunk. But it was kind of like a fundamental, groundbreaking hip hop record. It kind of got him into that whole mode. He was all of a sudden, they were singing about Cristal and Lexuses and all this high-end stuff that the other hip-hop guys weren't necessarily doing. Now, I ended up being Jay-Z's product manager when I was at Polygram when we had Def Jam. I didn't work on this record because it was his very first one. We didn't have that one, but looking back on it, it was not widely available in Canada at the time. There isn't really any per se award certifications or anything on this record, even though very quickly Jay-Z became quite massive at the time. By the time that second record rolled around, it was all hands on deck for Jay-Z. But because he had Rockefeller Records, it was independent from Def Jam, and it's kind of like that whole thing where you've got these artists that they do a distribution deal with a record company, but they control their own destiny, and that's what Jay-Z always did.
Here's a segue. Same week, a song called Wannabe by the Spice Girls is released in the UK. I think it came out a little bit later in North America, but what this record, this band it just went, ballistic.
What does it place on the Rolling Stone list, Scott? Do you have that?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. I don't have that handy, but I'm not sure. You know what? I don't even know if that's in the 500 singles.
No, I don't know. But good question. It ended up being the biggest selling girl group single of all time, and was #1 in 37 countries. So you had to acknowledge that, and it was pandemonium when they came to the streets of Toronto. You talk about history of bands. You look back at certain things when people talk about the Bay City Rollers came to Toronto in 1976, but you're going to remember like when the Spice Girls came to Toronto and invaded Much Music. It was pandemonium on Queen Street and everywhere else where they went for quite some time, and they were bigger than big.
Well, one thing, and you would appreciate this working for a record company, is the people that will sort of poo-poo and laugh at songs like that and bands like the Spice Girls. But if it wasn't for artists like the Spice Girls and songs like Wannabe that funded and helped finance so much of the record companies, A&R, and finding new bands out there, right?
Oh, absolutely. Those are the records that helped you make your year. They were that important.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a story about Polygram in Canada, and I'm sure it was the same in many other territories. And they used to have these quotas, sales quotas on these certain records on their priorities, and people would make bonuses off that. And in Polygram in the late 1970s, they didn't have a ceiling on the quota. So however well these records did, people would get these bonuses. Well, Polygram had Saturday Night Fever, and they had the Bee Gees catalog, right? So when Disco hit and Saturday Night Fever hit, secretaries bought houses. It was that like people got so well paid, and then Polygram kind of went, well, I think we should maybe put a ceiling on the bonuses that we have because we're paying out too much money on that. But seriously, those are the you do well with these big records, and it was the same with a lot of these big hip hop records. Man, they help make your year. And when I was at Interscope, like, oh my God, you'd sit there and look at 50 Cent sales and Eminem sales, and it's like, no wonder Interscope's so big. Like these 50 Cent and Eminem was like outselling everything by like 3 to 1 at one point. It was unbelievable how much more these records were selling than these big, like U2 at the time. They were killing acts like U2 and things like that. So
yeah, and that's a whole other discussion about radio airplay back in those days and the lack of radio airplay of hip hop, right? Ridiculous. That could be a whole other episode. Let's look at June 30th, 1996, Edgefest, Molson Park, Barrie. This is a great lineup. Tea Party, 5440, we talked about earlier, Our Lady Peace, Ashley McIsaac, I Mother Earth, 13 Engines, Killjoys, Big Sugar. That's a good one. I wasn't at that one. Were you at that one, Ivor?
I think I was there for you know what? I can't remember. I was at so many of those Edgefest because a lot of those bands repeated in
true,
multiple years, and I'm like, okay, I think I don't know. I can't remember if I was or not. I was at lots of Edgefest, but I don't think I was at that one. In my universe at the time, we didn't have any of those acts that I'm aware of. So
yeah, okay. You just mentioned U2 a second ago. Let's roll into the 2000s, and I see that the song Elevation is released this week from U2. That was from the album All That You Can't Leave Behind. Yes, good album, actually.
It was a really, really big record for them, and it was somewhat of a comeback for them. It was a #1 record in Canada. They won a Grammy for their best rock performance off of that. So, and I remember going to the tour, and it was phenomenal. It was absolutely phenomenal.
You just mentioned there about, I can't remember, Edgefests, which year, which shows, and the repeated bands and stuff like that. It's funny because this week is when the Warehouse became the Kool Haus. So that was June 22nd, 2001. Although there was a couple of events in the space before they officially opened. But anyway, and I was trying to remember all the different shows from, and I can't remember whether it was Kool Haus that I saw.
That's it. I can't. Warehouse or Warehouse, right? And I was like, as this morning, I was thinking about this, going, okay. I remember seeing Ozzy there. I remember seeing Joe Strummer there, Queens of the Stone Age, and Judas Priest and Motorhead, and like all of these shows. But then I was like looking up, going. And then Gaga played in there, and Prince did a show, and then the Stones. And then I'm like, well, I thought the Stones might have been on the other side at RPM.
And it's all in the same space, right? Yeah.
They had the Molson Blind Date with the Pistols in there. And I'm like, I can't remember which was which. And then, of course, all the dance stuff. I remember Armin van Buuren being there on a regular basis. A lot of the sort of like big, European DJs would come in and play the room too. And
raves in there too. Yeah.
And in hindsight, to me, the room wasn't, it wasn't anything that special other than, it was a decent space, but it was just kind of like that big open warehouse or whatever. And
I think honestly, the only difference I think between Warehouse and Kool Haus was they did some damping of the sounds. There were some complaints with the Warehouse. So up on the roof, they put some of these buffers or dampers, they call them. And so they spent money mostly on the roof just to keep the sound from bouncing around so much. I think that was about it.
Well, it's the best thing you can do at that point when you do those things, because I will forever curse Live Nation and the handful of people who booked the International Center and the shows up there, that there was never anything done, and they were the worst sounding places.
Yeah.
And awful
okay.
too.
To wrap up this week, we just have some concerts this week. Ivor, you want to mention some of the shows in the week ahead? Just a few selections of some of the shows.
We got Steve Earle playing the Danforth Music Hall. Paul Simon, that's Steve Earle on the 23rd. Paul Simon is at the RBC stage on the 25th. I believe we've got Wolf Mother playing at History on the 24th. Coco Roco, one of my favorite UK jazz influence bands, is playing at the Phoenix on the 25th. Evanescence is at RBC on the 29th, as is Jack Johnson on the 30th. And also on the 30th is St. Vincent at Roy Thompson Hall. That is what's upcoming.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for joining us this week. Don't forget, next week we're going to have Humble and Fred
Yes.
as part of our... we'll do a regular episode, but Humble and Fred's going to be a special edition. So that's coming up in the future. And anything else we forgot?
I'm sure people will remind us if we forgot some stuff.
Oh, yeah. Or we got something wrong.
Or something wrong, which, yes, of course.
Thanks, everybody. Okay, have a great rest of June. And, yeah, summer's here. The weather's getting better for sure. And anyway, we thank you for your support. Have a great day.
Early Happy Canada Day to everybody.
Yes.